Hello everyone, good evening, good morning, wherever you're from joining. This is Rajendra. I'll be hosting this webinar. Okay, great. We have very good number. So let me introduce myself first. Okay, so my name is Rajendra. I'm associated with Cognitia from last 2 years. Okay, I do trainings on lot of subjects like Docker, Kubernetes, lot of DevOps tools. Okay, then Python, Golang, machine learning, and I have more than 12 years of experience in IT, and from last 5 years I'm into the training field. Okay, so today we have a very interesting topic, Kubernetes, because now whole world is moving to the container orchestration. So let's start. Okay, so the topic of the webinar is Kubernetes, the ultimate platform for scale and edge. Okay, so why it is ultimate platform? Okay, so first of all, before Kubernetes, okay, before we start with actually webinar, okay, so let's first talk a little bit on the Cognitia side. So what we do and all. Okay, Cognitia is into the training. Okay, it's a part of a Collabora group. Okay, if you see here, like more than 150,000 professional trained worldwide. Okay, and we are delivering training in more than 45 countries. Over 7,000 industry veterans as instructors. Okay, and we have associated with more than 450 plus customers. Okay, and we are authorized training partner for many companies. Okay, so to list a few, we have like Red Hat, Microsoft, and many more. And if you see in what all the fields that we provide the trainings, okay, if you see whatever the training you see here, like nowadays the whole world is into the digitization, right? And everyone is talking about AI and ML. Okay, so whatever the latest technologies are into the boom, and everyone is looking for that. So we are teaching all those technologies. Okay, and which is the need of market. Okay, like machine learning, everyone is moving from monolithic architecture to microservices. Okay, so what all the things required for microservices, we have a lot of training part on that as well. Then we are talking about RPA, like robotic process automation, then IoT, then again DevOps. Okay, then cloud computing, cyber security. Okay, so all these are very hot technologies, and Cognitia provides training to everyone. Okay, okay, so let's start with why containerization. Okay, so why we required a containerization. So first of all, let's talk before containerization what was happening. Okay, so before containerization, what we are doing, like if you want to create any system or if you want to deploy your application, we are using virtualization, like we are creating the virtual machines. Okay, and then on those virtual machines we are deploying the application. Okay, like there we are finding a lot of resource wastage we are there was. Okay, so due to this resource wastage, even though we have a lot of resources, but still we are not able to use. Why we are not able to use? Because like let's say I have a 16 GB RAM. Okay, and now, okay, now if I deploy any application on that particular system. Okay, so first of all, one thing that we had to do is, like, even if my application is consuming, let's say 10 GB, still I need to have more memory on that particular machine, because if my application is consuming more memory, I should have a backup, otherwise my application will get crash. Okay, so we are putting extra memory unnecessarily, and then even if we are not using it, we need to purchase that. Even if we are not using, and unnecessary we are increasing the cost. Okay, so to resolve that, we came up with virtualization concept, where on the single host we are creating multiple operating system, and then under that operating system we are trying to create a we're trying to install the applications. Okay, on each separate virtual machine. But there as well, the major problem was that with the help of, means on our host machine, with the help of hypervisor, we are creating multiple operating system. Okay, guest operating system. So unnecessary in the guest operating system as well, we are losing lot of resources, as well as to start the VM or to stop the VM, it was taking too much time. Okay, so there were a lot of problems the whole world was facing, right? And apart from that as well, like if we talk about the development part, okay, where we are getting the requirements from the client. Okay, so when we are getting the requirements from the client, so developers started their development, but along with that development they have to also consider like what will be the platform where all this software and all that is going to be deployed. Okay, they have to consider that part as well, because like earlier we are facing a lot of problem, like there is a platform dependency. We need to consider the architecture or the operating system. Okay, according to all this consideration, developer has to write the code. Okay, guys, you are not able to see my screen. I see few people are saying that you guys are not able to see my screen. Can you just someone confirm? Because I have shared the screen. Yeah, so people are saying they can see. Maybe those who are not able to see, they can just quickly rejoin. Okay, so let's continue. Means developer has to take care of all the environment related stuff as well, like write the separate code or the like code in a if else block, where if the operating system is Linux, what needs to do, if the operating system is Windows, what needs to do. Okay, so this, apart from writing a actual business logic, developer has to consider all these things as well. Okay, and still you must have heard that like developer saying that this software is working on my system, tester will say that okay, it's not working, this feature is not working on my system. So that type of statements we must have heard it. So due to that we have faced a lot of problems. Okay, and due to all these reasons, the whole world came up with the concept called containerization. So what this containerization is, so basically this containerization is for now works only on a Linux kernel. Okay, so even though you must have heard that like Docker is also supported on the Windows. Okay, even though that is a news, but the actual reality is that Windows is coming up with a lightweight Linux kernel. Okay, due to that actually your Docker is working on Windows as well. Okay, it's not like on Windows kernel itself your containerization or Docker is working. Okay, that's not true. Okay, because they are coming with lightweight Linux kernel along with the Windows kernel. That's why we can create a Dockerization on the window. Okay, so now how this containerization works? Containerization actually, instead of having a complete OS on top of hypervisor, okay, we are using a host operating system only. Okay, we are using that kernel only, and with the help of runtime engine, we are actually creating multiple containers, and then we are isolating, because in the Linux there are features like C groups, namespaces. So in the containerization all these features are utilized properly, and then with the help of that we are creating multiple container. Okay, so the first advantage or the why we should use the containerization, because we are completely removing the hypervisors. Okay, and due to that what is happening is the start and stop time required for the container, it's very low, because they are directly done by your host operating system and not the hypervisor. Okay, like the way we are doing in the virtual machines. Okay, then if we talk about the DevOps, okay, so DevOps is all about automation, right? Everywhere we want to do the automation in the whole our software development life cycle. Okay, now in the DevOps you must have heard the tools like Ansible, Chef, Puppet, Jenkins. Okay, then a lot of build tools. Okay, so there are a lot of tools are available in the DevOps. Okay, now to deploy those tools, to configure those tools, to create the developer environment, to create the test environment, to create the staging server, okay, acceptance testing server, there are a lot of machines we required. Okay, now if every time for every requirement if you keep creating a virtual machine, that will really cost us to create this environment and then deploying all this stuff. Okay, but due to this containerization, what happens is we can quickly spin up the container with the help of Docker, and then we can deploy all this stuff. Okay, so due to all this reason, the containerization is really helping the DevOps to get a boom in the market or to get the usage of it. Okay, the next advantage that we get with the containerization is the cloud native development. Okay, so now if you see, due to this corona time, now everyone is working from home. Okay, everyone need a remote access. Okay, they need a machine for development and everywhere. Okay, so for that purpose as well, you can quickly spin up the container and you can give that as a development environment to everyone. Okay, so that is really helping to the everyone to create a environment quickly, and as and when it is not required, you can simply delete that environment as well. Okay, and that is happening very fast. Okay, that is happening very fast with the help of containerization. Okay. Now, if we talk about the time required to start and stop the container, that is also very low because containers are very lightweight. Because in the containers, we are not actually using the complete operating system. We just use the stripped version of that operating system. And due to that, what happens? It's a very lightweight. Like if we just talk about the usual operating system size, it's maybe around 20-25 GB we get. Like if we get any ISO image for any operating system, it would be around 20-25 GB. Okay. Now, if we talk about the container, hardly container image is around 1 GB. Okay. So due to that huge difference, if we want to start and stop the container, you can see it will take hardly less than or 1/10 time of your 1/10 second of time. Okay, so I'll show you that in the demo that how fast the container are starting and how we can stop it quickly. Okay, so due to all this reason, the containerization is very popular. Okay, now let's talk about the Docker. Okay, so what is Docker? Okay, so Docker is a runtime engine. Okay, so Docker is a runtime engine through which we can manage our whole life cycle of container. Okay, so you can say something like a Docker is a manager who is managing the complete life cycle of container. Like if you want to create the image for container, you can do it with the Docker. If you want to create container, stop container, if you want to pull the image, push the image. Okay, so for all this stuff we use the Docker. Okay, so let me just walk you through the workflow of the Docker. Okay, now the first thing that we need to do is let's say you have one application and that application is already running on some standalone machine. Okay, now you want to migrate this application. Okay, you want to migrate this application in a container. Okay, so what you need to do, first thing that you need to do is you need to create a image of your application. Okay, so that image is nothing but it's one bundle which contains the environment required for your application plus your application and the required all the dependency of your application. Okay, so this image is nothing but the combination of all these things. Okay, so first we need to create the image of your application. Now to create this image, what we need to do in the Docker term, first we need to write a Docker file. Okay, so in the Docker file we need to mention the step like, okay, I want to use this stripped version of operating system. Okay, then I need all these dependencies. Okay, so install means in that image all these dependencies should be there. Okay, then we need to put that code in that particular image. Okay, then we need, if your application is running on some XYZ port, we need to open by default the container, all the container ports are closed. Okay, so we need to start that expose that container port as well. Okay, then if your application requires some environment variable, we need to mention that. Okay, so all that stuff, whatever is required for your application, we need to put that in the Docker file. Okay, now once we are done with the writing a Docker file, with the help of Docker build command, okay, what we do, we run the Docker build command and we pass this Docker file. Okay, so that Docker file will be sent to Docker host. Okay, so once we do Docker build on that host, it will create the image. Okay, by using Docker build, image will be created. Now once image is ready, if you want to use that image on that particular Docker host itself, okay, means if you want to start that application on that Docker host machine itself, simply you can do Docker run and your container will be started. Okay, so difference between image and container is that container is nothing but just a runtime running instance of your image. Okay, so that we do using Docker run command. Okay, so if you do Docker run, your container will be started. Okay, now next, containers are by default stateless. Okay, that means if you stop the container, okay, or if the container gets terminated, whatever the data got created by the application, that will be removed, okay, because it will not store that data. Containers are stateless. If you want to store that data permanently, what we need to do is we need to run a docker commit command, okay. If you do docker commit, a new image can be created, or you can overwrite the same image as well. So you can run docker commit, and then new image will be created if you want, or if you want to overwrite the same image, you can give the same image name, and then in that image, whatever the change happened in the container, a running container, that will be saved in that image, okay. Now next thing is, if you want to change the image name, okay, if you want to change the image, let's say I have the first image like Cognitia colon 1.0, okay, so 1.0 is nothing but the version that we are giving to that image, okay. If you want to maintain a multiple version of your image, okay, like the way we maintain for our code, okay, so in that similar way, if you want to do that, we use the colon version number, okay. So if you want to change that version number or the name of the image using docker tag command, we can do that, okay. Now let's say you created the image, and now this image you want to send to someone else, where he can just simply run that image and can start the container, okay. So now what I can do, either I need to copy this image to another developer system, okay, or there is another way, and that is a standard way to store that image on the repository, okay. We call it as a registry, okay. So what is the registry? Registry is nothing but the one network storage, or a storage where we can store all the images, and then from that storage, whoever wants to use this particular images, they can simply pull that image and start using it, okay. You can definitely relate this with your Git, okay, where what we do is, developer writes their code, and if they want to save that, okay, first they can commit the code and they can push that code onto the remote repository, that is GitHub. So similarly, in case of a Docker image as well, you can create the image, and if you want to share it with someone, you can push that image, okay, using Docker push command. You can push that image on the remote repository, okay. We call it as a registry, okay. Now this registry could be a private registry or public registry, okay. So now this Docker community also providing one public repository or a public registry, that the name of that registry is Docker Hub, okay, where we can push all the public images, okay. They are also providing a way to store the private images as well, but usually we should not put the private images on the public network, okay, because that could be misused, okay. So what you can do, you can create your own private registry as well, and you can store that images on your private registry as well. That private registry won't be accessible to whole world, okay. It will be accessible to very limited people, or maybe inside the organization only, okay. Now once you push that image on the remote repository, if anybody else wants to use, they can just run simply docker pull, and then that image will be pulled on their Docker host, and again by using docker run, they can simply start that image and run the container, okay. So this is the typical workflow that happens in the Docker, okay. So as and when you join the course, okay, we'll see all these steps practically and one by one, okay. The next part is why we need a container orchestration, okay. Why we need a container orchestration. So what we have seen in the previous slide is that everything is happening on the a single node, okay, or a single Docker host. But in the production, okay, in the production, we may need a lot of Docker host machine, because if we talk about any real life cases, like let's say I want to host a Flipkart website, okay. For Flipkart website, there could, we are getting like maybe 1000 requests per seconds, okay. So now to manage this a very big workload, we cannot just run a single host machine, and we cannot deploy everything on that, because if we install if we have only one host, and if your application is running on that, and if due to some reason if your host there is a problem with host, then your complete application will goes down. Okay, so due to that reason, it's always better if you have a multiple nodes or a multiple Docker host and your application is running everywhere. Okay, so if you need more than one Docker host, we need a container orchestrator. Okay, then if you want to decide on which particular Docker host your application needs to be started, okay, then again we need a someone like a scheduling facility where it will decide like out of this 10 Docker host where my application should be deployed. Okay, then let's say Flipkart has a sale. Okay, there is a upcoming sale, and due to that sale, now they have to scale their application. Okay, let's say their earlier application was running on 2 hosts. Okay, like let's say though 2 containers are running, but now these 2 containers are not enough in the upcoming sale. Okay, we may need like we may get a lot of more requests. Okay, let's say now getting 1000 requests, and in the sale maybe we are getting 10,000 requests per second. Okay, now if your single instance of your application is not going to process all these requests, so for that reason what we can do, we can increase the number of containers. Okay, so to scale your application, we need an automatic way to scale up or scale down. Okay, so for that purpose as well we need a orchestrator. Okay, now if you have multiple instances are running, okay, you have multiple instances are running, then for user they have only one interface. Okay, so we need a load balancer that can just send the request to all the containers which are running. Okay, because if we send continuously a request to only one container, then unnecessary it means it will not be able to handle all the requests. So for that purpose we should have a load balancer that can route the traffic to all the containers one by one. Okay, due to that what will happen, load will be distributed, and all means people will get the proper response, or they won't get a timeout and all stuff. Okay, so for all this reason we need a container orchestrator. Okay, and there is one more important reason is the high availability for your application, because if we create only one or two container, and if due to some reason if that particular container got terminated, it's someone's responsibility to automatically have another instance of that, so that your application keep functioning. Or people like let's say take example, I have only 2 containers are running. Okay, and now at any point of time my single application can process 1000 requests per second. Okay, and you are getting around 2000 requests per second. Okay, so definitely there are 2 instances are enough. Okay, they can definitely process all the requests. But what if you are gonna one of the container is gets terminated? Okay, so in that case only one instance is running, and on that one instance itself there is a too much load. Okay, then due to too much load, definitely there is a chance that your application will fail. Okay, so to avoid that type of problem, we should have a mechanism through which as soon as your container instance is getting terminated, it should be restarted. Okay, the new instance should be created. Okay, so to make this highly availability, we need a container orchestrator. Okay, so there are actually a lot of container orchestrator available in the market. Okay, even Docker community as well providing one orchestrator called Docker Swarm. Okay, but in the Docker Swarm we have a very limited functionality, that is due to that reason it's not too much popular. Okay, so Google in 2014 come up with the project called Kubernetes. Okay, and Kubernetes is completely open source. Okay, it's a completely open source, and now they have given this particular project to the Linux Foundation. Okay, and now we call it as a Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Okay, they are managing this complete project now, and it has a huge community. Okay, and there are a lot of features, new features are coming in. So that's why now everyone is moving. Okay, everyone is moving to the container orchestration. And why specifically Kubernetes? Because it's a open source. Okay, and nowadays means till the time maybe like 3-4 years back, people were having only monolithic application where everything was there in the single application. Okay, now everyone is moving to the microservices architecture where they are just creating a small modules and they are deploying those small modules as a containers. Okay, and then containers are internally talking to each other, and then your whole product is becoming out of that all these microservices. Okay, so if you want to manage all these microservices, okay, we need a container orchestrator. Okay, and whatever all this container orchestrator requirement you have, like you need a scaling, you need a scheduling feature. Okay, you need your high availability, you need a easy deployment like zero. Okay, so if all these features are required and Kubernetes is providing all this and it's open source, due to all this reason Kubernetes is very popular. Okay, even Kubernetes provides zero downtime upgrade. Okay, that means if you have any application running already and if you want to release a new version of it, okay, you don't need even a 0 second of downtime. Okay, you can live upgrade your application, and if due to some reason in the upgrade process if you get any challenge, okay, you can also downgrade or you can roll back that operation so that it will keep functioning with older version quickly. Okay, so now let's go to the demo part. Okay, and we'll see first how we can create a simple application. We can create simple container, and then that similar container how we can deploy inside the Kubernetes cluster as well. Okay, so now let's go to that part. Okay, so I have Docker installed. Okay, how to install and all stuff we'll see in detail. Okay, in the sessions, in our training sessions. Okay, but for now it's already installed, and let me show you. I have a very simple application. It's a Python application. I'll show you. Okay, it's a very simple application. What this is doing is it's just a Flask application and it is starting this server on 8080 port. Okay, and as soon as if we want to reach to this application, okay, if we hit the request to this application, it will simply say hello from container world. Okay, now I want to migrate this particular application inside the container. Okay, so first thing that we talked, what we need is we need to create an image. Okay, so to create the image, what we need to do is we need to write a Docker file. Okay, so you can see that in the Docker file we have a few instruction. Okay, so what this instruction is saying that, okay, I want to a base stripped version of image. Okay, so there is an image called Python 2.7. Okay, the image name is Python and its a version name is 2.7. Okay, so what it is doing, it is going to pull this image from the a registry. It's a public registry because this is a public image. Anybody who wants to use it, they can simply pull this image and they can start using it. Okay, so this image is available on the Docker Hub. Docker Hub is a public repository, so you can simply use it. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm saying in the Docker file that use a base version of image having version this. Okay, then what I'm saying, copy the code of my application from current directory to the /tmp directory. Okay, then for this application I need some requirement. The requirement I have kept in the requirement.txt file I have in the current directory. Okay, so that is, you can see requirements.txt. Okay, so I need only a Flask Flask package we have in a Python. Okay, so that is my requirement. So what I'm doing in the Docker file, I'm just installing all the requirements inside image. Okay, so pip install, pip is the Python package manager. With the help of that, I'm just installing the requirements. Okay, now if you see my app.py, you can see that application is running on 8080 port. Okay, so by default all the containers are, means all the ports of the containers are closed. Okay, they are not open. So if you want any specific ports to be open, okay, we need to expose that port. Okay, so that is what we are doing here, that expose port 8080, and then as soon as we start the image, what should be the first command that should be run? Okay, so that we are saying that run python we are copying that app.py into the TMP. So I'm just saying that run this app.py. Okay, so this is the simplest possible application. We have written the Docker file, and now we need to build the image. Okay, so to build the image, we have seen that there is a Docker build command we talked about. Okay, so Docker build your image. Let's say my image name I am giving. Okay, and then let's say version 1.0. Okay, Docker build -t we have to give option, and then image. Okay, and then we need to provide the Docker file path. Okay, so now Docker file is there in my current directory only, so that's why I'm just giving dot. So if I run it, you can see that first thing that it is doing is it's pulling Python 2.7 image from the Docker Hub registry. Okay, so once that is done, it will do the next step. Okay, so this way one by one it will do the all 5 steps, and then our image will be ready. Okay, so it's almost done. Once image is ready, what we'll do is, you can see the second step is happening. Third, now it is installing that Flask. Okay, and then it is exposing the port, and then it is adding this command. Okay, so you can see that image is ready. So how we see the image in the Docker, if we do Docker images, you can see that we just now built this image. Okay, my image 1.0. okay, built 11 seconds ago, and the size is 906. Okay, so now image is ready. Okay, so with this image, how we can create the container? Okay, so the command to create the container is docker run -d is for running this container in a background mode. Okay, we don't need to because if I don't use a -d, what will happen? The container logs will be printed on standard output device. Okay, so we don't need that, so that's why I'm giving just -d. Okay, then we can give the name to the container. So let's say the name, that is first container I have. Okay, then there is a -p option. Okay, -p is for using the port. Okay, now we have seen that we are exposing the container port 8080. That means by default all the ports closed for container, but we open the 8080 because our application is running on that. But if you see, our container is running inside host machine. Okay, that will not be accessible from external world. Okay, so to make it accessible, what we need to do is we need to bind the container port to your host machine port. So due to that, what will happen? Our host machine is accessible to the external world. So if they try to reach our host machine, and if you bind any port, let's say I'm again here binding 8080, there is no compulsion that you should bind it to 8080. You can bind it to any port. Okay, so the first is my host port, second is my container port. Okay, so I'm binding these 2 ports, and then I'm giving my image reference, my image 1.0. Okay, so let me explain the command again. Docker run is the command, -d is for running this container in the background, -name first is the name of the container, -p is for giving the mapping of my host port and the container port, and then last one is a image. Okay, so if I run it, you can see that container got created. How to see running container? You can run the command docker ps. Okay, so you can see that this image got created. Okay, so this container got created. So this is my container ID, this is the image I used, and then this is the command that is running inside that container. It started from 8 seconds ago, status up, and this is the port binding we have done, and the name. Okay, so now our application is running. Okay, it's running on 8080 port. So how to access this application? Curl. Okay, now I am binding to my host machine, so I can access this something like this, localhost :8080. So if I run it, you can see that I'm getting the output hello from container world. Okay, so how it is happening? I am hitting the request to my host machine 8080 port, so it will internally forward that request to the container port. Okay, and then on that container port my application is running. Okay, and then that application is responding with this particular message. Okay, now you can see a docker container log, something like this, docker logs and our container name, that is first. Okay, so you can see that inside that container the server got started and it is printing this message. Okay, so something like this, you can see the logs. Okay, now The major thing is, now if I want to create a multiple container, let's say 10, 20, 50 container I want to create. Okay, now if I need to create this many container, okay, I always going to get of my host machine resource limitation. Okay, so I need to have another host, okay, where I can start the container. Okay, now if I keep adding the multiple host, I need a someone who can manage all this. Okay, so for that we need a container orchestration. Okay, so for that purpose we have Kubernetes. Okay, so Kubernetes will manage multiple host systems. Okay, and then inside those hosts it will create multiple containers. Okay, so now we'll see the Kubernetes demo. So the first thing is we need a Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so I have already a Kubernetes cluster. So how to install that cluster and all stuff, okay, we'll see that in the sessions. Okay, but for now I have a cluster ready. So if you see how to see the cluster, there's a one command line utility called kubectl. Okay, if I do kubectl get nodes, it will give me how many nodes are there in my cluster. Okay, so what we'll do, let me first talk about the Kubernetes architecture quickly, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the demo. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation, and this is a typical Kubernetes architecture. Okay, so in the Kubernetes architecture we have basically two types of nodes. Okay, one is our master node, or we call it as a control plane, and then second type of nodes are nothing but our actual machines where we are going to start the containers. Okay, now in the Kubernetes term we have one logical entity, we call it as a pod. Okay, so the containers are going to be run inside that pod. Okay, so now going forward, for here we are not going to say container, we are going to say the pods. Okay, so nodes are the machines where actually pods are getting started. Okay, so in this particular diagram you can see that there is one controller node, okay, or we can say it as a master node, and then we can have any number of worker node, okay, or we can simply call it as a node. Now in the master node we have basically four important components here. Okay, and there at the top you can see kubectl. Okay, so kubectl is nothing but a command line interface through which we can interact with the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so if we talk about this four important component, so Kube API server is, you can say it's a heart of your master node. Okay, because which is responsible for whole cluster. Okay, like accepting the request, validating it, forwarding it to the another component. Okay, so all that stuff is done by the Kube API server. etcd is the database component where all the cluster information is stored. Then this controller manager is responsible for high availability of your application. Okay, that means it will make sure that your pods are continuously running. Okay, and then scheduler is the component which is responsible for choosing the best node for your pod. Okay, if you have a 10 node, so out of that 10 node, on which particular node I should start a pod. Okay, so that will be decision taken by this scheduler. Okay, now when we come back to our node where actual your pods are going to be deployed. Okay, so on that we have a two major component, one is kubelet and another is a container runtime engine, that is nothing but our Docker. Okay, so kubelet is something like you can consider a captain of node. Okay, which is responsible for completely managing the node, like it is providing continuously, it will provide all the information about node to the master node. Okay, then as soon as we get any request from the master node, that kubelet will, with the help of Docker runtime engine or a container runtime engine, will start the pod. Okay, so these are the two components will be available on all the nodes available in the cluster. Okay, and then there is a component called load balancer. Okay, that load balancer is responsible for sending the traffic to multiple pods. So let's say I have a one pod. Okay, there are, let's say, 4 replicas of that pods are running, and then if any request is coming, so we need to send that request to one of the pods. Okay, so there is we need a load balancer that can send the request to one of the pod. Okay, so we have a load balancer component, and here this cloud provider network edge that we see is, we can integrate this Kubernetes cluster with any third-party cloud provider like AWS, Azure, okay, GCP. Okay, so any of the third-party cloud provider, we can integrate with this component, and this end users will interact with this load balancer. Okay, and end users will send the request to the load balancer, and load balancer will internally send the request to one of the pod with some algorithm like round robin method. So this is a typical architecture. Now let's go to the demo. So we have a Kubernetes cluster already running. You can see that one master node is there and 2 worker nodes are there. Okay, so what I'm doing is, I'm going to create again a simple application. Okay, there is one image already available on the Docker Hub called Nginx. Okay, Nginx is the one server. So we are going to create one deployment which will contain, let's say, 5 replicas, and we are going to use the Nginx image. Okay, so how to create a deployment? So for now, if you see, if you want to see any resource, there are different resource type. Let's say pod. Okay, if you want to see the pod, what you need to do is kubectl get pods. Okay, so pods we can run kubectl get pods. So there are already few pods are running. Let me first clean up that, and then we'll create our own. That got deleted. So now every time, instead of typing every time kubectl, what I'm doing, I'm just setting the alias. Okay, so k is equal to kubectl. So I don't need to type kubectl every time. Now if I see kubectl get pods, okay, po is the short name for pod, and you can see there is nothing running. Okay, there is one static pod is running. Okay, so what is static pod, we'll talk it later. Okay, now I want to create a deployment. Okay, I want to create a deployment. So what is deployment? So deployment is a Kubernetes component through which we can create a pod. Along with that pod, we can create one controller which will continuously monitor your pod. Okay, so if due to some reason, if your pod gets terminated, it will make sure that another instance of that pod is ready. So let me create the deployment. So how we can create? kubectl create deployment. The name of deploy, let's say my deploy, and then image, what image we want to use. Let's say I'm using the image Nginx, and then for now, let me first create the YAML. So how we create the YAML? Using imperative command. So let me write the command try run is equal to client -o YAML. So it will just create the YAML and it will store in the file. Okay, so I'm just saving it to the YAML. Okay, so YAML is a configuration file. Okay, YAML is a configuration file which we provide to the kubectl, and kubectl will forward this to the API server. Okay, so let's see the YAML file. So you can see that this type of YAML file we need to write it. So here we are giving the API version of my resource that I want to create. I want to create a deployment. Then this metadata is nothing but the information about this deployment. Then under specification, the actual specification of your component would be there, like replicas. Okay, so how many instance of that pod you want to create? Okay, let's say I say 5. Okay, so 5 instance of this particular pod I am creating. Then this match label is used by the replication controller. I'll talk about in a bit. And then this below template is nothing but your pod template, where I'm saying that under this pod, I'll have this container. Okay, image nginx container will be there. Okay, so now let's create this deployment. So to create this deployment, it's very easy. kubectl apply -f deploy.yaml. Okay, so if I run it, you can see that deployment got created. And now if I do kubectl get all, so you can see that there is a one deployment got created. Sorry, deployment got created. Then there is a one replication controller got created. Okay, and then there are, you can see 5 pods got created. Now let me rerun again so that I see all the containers are in a running state. You can see that 5 pods are created. To manage that 5 pods, there is a one replica set or replication controller also got created, and then associated deployment. Okay, so first deployment will be created. Under that, the replica set will be created, and this replica set will manage the 5 pod that we have created. So if you see all the pods and where those pods started, okay, there are multiple. If you want to see more information where those started, for in that case what we need to do is -o void we need to add. We'll get to know where all these pods started. Okay, so here if you see 3 pods started on kind worker and 2 pods started on kind worker 2. If you see kubectl get nodes, I have 2 worker nodes, kind worker and kind worker 2. That means there are 2 machines. Out of that, automatically 3 instances of my application started on kind worker and 2 instances of my application started on kind worker 2. And if you see here, I'm just deleting one of this. Okay, if I do, how to delete? kubectl delete po is for pod, and I am deleting the pod with name. You can see the last string 4ndfk. Okay, I'm deleting with this name. So if I delete it, you will see that again one more pod will be created. Sorry, kubectl get pod. So you can see that even though 4ndfk is not there in this list, but new one got created. Okay, you can see this one got created. It started 9 seconds ago. So who is doing that? That a replication controller is doing that. Okay, that is making sure that at any point of time 5 pods are there running in that cluster. So this is done by the controller. So this is controller is providing the high availability. Okay, now the next thing is, let's say everything is running, application is running fine, but now you got a new feature for application. You got a new feature for application, and now you need to deploy that new feature in the current cluster. Okay, so what we need to do is, without affecting the user, okay, user should not affect, and still we should get the new feature. So for that purpose, in Kubernetes we have a way through which we can upgrade the application. So how this upgradation happens? Now the new feature means we should get a new image with some tag. So what we'll do, we'll use a nginx image with some different tag and we'll upgrade. So how upgradation starts? So right now you can see there are 5 pods are running. So when we upgrade, so what happens in the background is, first what will happen, there is a new replication controller will be created. Okay, so now if you see, there is only one replication controller is there with some XYZ version now. Now if we create a new, or we roll out a new image, another new replica set will be created, and along with that replica set, what it will do, it will first create a new pod with new version of your image. Okay, your application old 5 pods are still running, only the 6th pod will be created with a new image. Once that is running, one instance of your old pod will be terminated. So due to that, what will happen, now you will have 4 pods running with old image, one pod with a new image. Okay, so now whichever requests are coming to the new pod, they will see the new feature. Whichever requests are forwarded by the load balancer to the old pod, they will get the new old UI or from an old application, they will get the response. So this way, now next time it will create another pod with a new image. Once that is running, it will terminate the one pod from the old image. So this way it will do one by one, and at the end you will have all the 5 pods with a new image. Okay, so here if you observe, user will not face any downtime, because at any point of time they were able to access the application either with the old version or a new version. For user, that doesn't matter. For them, they should serve their purpose. Like if someone is booking something on the Flipkart website, their end goal is to get their product ordered. Okay, whether that is ordered from the old UI or new UI, that doesn't matter. Okay, so that is what happening here. Now let me just show you practically here. So how you can change the image. So we have imperative command kubectl set image for my deployment, my deploy. Okay, this is the my deploy is the name of my deployment. Okay, so the command is kset image is the command, deploy is the resource name deployment, and then my deploy is my resource name. Okay, and then we need to give the name of your container, name of my container. Let me see that what is the name. So how to see that? We have that file vi my deploy. Let me see what is the file name that we have created. It's a deploy.yaml. Okay, so what is the name we have? It's a my deploy sorry, it's a nginx. We need to give the nginx. So let's do that. So kubectl set image for deployment, my deploy, your container name, and the image that you want to change. Okay, so I want to change the image to nginx, let's say 1.7.8. okay, so this particular image is available on the Docker Hub registry, that's why I'm using. If this image is not there, it will give me the error. Okay, so before that, let me show you one thing here. If you want to see what is the current image my pods are using, what you can do is kubectl describe pod and the pod name. Okay, so if I run this, you can see whole lot of stuff, information about your pod. Okay, but the right now important one that we need is your image name. So here you can see that I'm using only a nginx image. Okay, there is no tag for now, but I'm upgrading with the image tag nginx colon 1.7.8. so now let's see how we can do that. So this is my command. Now as soon as I run this, you can see that it's upgraded. Now if I see kubectl get po, you can see that few are in a container creating state, few are in a terminating. Okay, so what I talked about is that is what it is happening. Okay, it will create the new one and it will terminate the old one. Okay, and after some time we'll have only 5 instances which are running with a new image. Okay, you can see that now I have only 5 instances which are running with a new instances. Okay, so if you see kubectl describe my po and pod name, and if we scroll up some little bit up, okay, so this time you can see the image version nginx colon 1.7.8. okay, so this is how we can, without making any effect to the user, you can upgrade your application. Okay, now if you see, let's say now for your application there is a sale going to come, you need to upgrade or you need to scale the application or scale up or scale down. So for now, let's say I want to scale up, so only 5 instances are running. Let's say I want to make it as a 10. So how we can do that? It's again very easy. If I do kubectl scale my deployment, my deploy, and just we need to pass one argument, that is replicas, and if I make it 10, so what will happen? New 5 pods will be created. So let's see. So that is got scaled. If I do kubectl get pure, you can see that 5 more instances got created, and I have total 10 pods are running now. If you see where those got started, you can do -o wide, and you can see that few are running on kind worker, few are running on kind worker 2. Right now we have only 2 worker nodes. That's why they got distributed between these 2 nodes only. Okay, if you have more than 2, automatically scheduler will distribute all the nodes on all the pods on all the nodes. Okay, and if you want to scale down again, okay, we just need to change the number. Let's say 2. Okay, so if I do 2, that will be scaled. If I do kubectl get PO now, you can see that 8 instances are getting terminated. So now only 2 will be there. Okay, you can see that the about 2 one which is under this deployment. So only 2 are remaining. So this is how easy you can scale up, scale down. If you want to upgrade, if you want to roll back as well, it's again very easy. Okay, so all these are very easy steps, and you can do anything what you want. Okay, because all this, whatever the problems that usually people face in the production environment, okay, so for all these problems we have a very easy solution with Kubernetes. Okay, so that's why the whole world is moving to the Kubernetes, and we can do a lot of stuff. So apart from this as well, we have a lot of more stuff like scheduling. You can schedule your pod the way we want. We have a lot of algorithms through which we can schedule the way we want to schedule. Like let's say the requirement you have is your application required a SSD memory. Now it's not feasible to have SSD memory for all the nodes available in the cluster. So we can ask scheduler that I need this particular applications to be scheduled on the node where there is a SSD memory. So let's say out of 10 node, you have only on a 2 node you have a SSD memory. So with the help of some techniques, we call it as a tent and toleration or node selector or affinity. Okay, these are some scheduling algorithms we can say, through which we can specifically ask scheduler to schedule your application on all those nodes. Okay, so like this we have a lot of other features in Kubernetes. So all these we'll see in our whenever you join the courses, you'll get to learn a lot of things here. Okay, so now we have seen the demo. So let me just go back and show you the little bit about workflow. Okay, I'll just walk you through the workflow, and in the deep we'll see that workflow whenever you join the courses. We'll get to know all this in the detail. So what this workflow is all about, like we have seen the components of Kubernetes, like what is there on the control plane node, what is there on your worker node. Okay, so how the call is going, I'll show you that quickly. Okay, and then I'll take all the questions that you have. I see a lot of questions are coming, but we'll see that question just after we finish this workflow in next 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so you can see that as a user we are okay, this is something like a sequence diagram. So as a user we are going to start, or as a user, or you can say as a admin, we are going to start from here. Then the kubectl. Okay, this is nothing but the CLI through which we are interacting with the cluster. And then you can see the API server is here. Okay, this is nothing but one of the component of your master node. Then we talked about the etcd, and then we have a controller manager as well. Okay, so there is another diagram where we'll see the scheduler and usage of that. So you can see that we are sending that deployment to the kubectl. Okay, so kubectl is the CLI tool that we are using till now, that will validate your YAML file. Okay, that will validate your YAML file, and if the YAML file is valid, then it will send that request to the API server. If it is not valid on the CLI itself, you will get the error. Now once the request comes to the API server, it will first authenticate whether you are a valid user or not. If you are a valid user, then request will be forwarded. The next step is authorization. Now even though you are a valid user, but whether you have the privilege to do some operation, because we can provide a authorization for specific user to do specific things. Okay, so that validation will happen in the authorization step. The next step is admission control. Okay, admission control is nothing but there are ways in the Kubernetes through which we can limit resource utilization. Like now this user can use only this much resources, or this user can do this XYZ stuff. Okay, so whatever the limitation that you are applying, that will be validated in the admission control. Now if all these steps are validated, then your request will be stored in the etcd. Okay, and then with the help of some callbacks, the actual object initialization will happen. Now we are creating the deployment, so the deployment initialization will happen. Okay, now once the deployment object is initialized, deployment will also, every deployment will have a deployment controller to manage that deployment. Then the deployment controller will publish the replica set, or we call it as a replication controller, to manage the pods. And then that replication controller will start the pod. Now let's see what next happens. Once pod is published, okay, once pod is published, that API server will send that request in one queue. Okay, that request will be sent to that one queue, and then that your scheduler will continuously keep watch on that particular queue, and it will see that there is a new pod request came in, and there is a no node assigned to that particular pod where it needs to be started. So that scheduler will pick that request. It will have all the node information, so it will choose the best node out of all the available node, and then it will say that we have a new request, and this is the node on which you can start this particular pod. So new pod will be associated with that node, and then scheduler will send that request, or it will create a binding and it will send it to the API server. Now API server will send that request to that particular node's kubelet, because kubelet will be available on all the nodes. So API server will send that request to the kubelet. Now once kubelet gets that request, okay, kubelet is also responsible for continuously sending your whole node update to the master node. Okay, now along with that, once it gets the request, it will pull all the images, all the required content, networking related stuff. There are some associated components with kubelet, like CNI plugin, we call it as, like container network interface will be there. So with the help of that, it will create all the networking stuff. Then it will pull the images. Once the images are pulled, it will, there is one step called liveness and readiness probe as well. So it will run that liveness and readiness probe, and once everything gets successful, it will finally create a pod, and then that pod will be in a running state. Okay, and you can see that there are some boxes like API server request loop. So what does that mean? So that API's request loop is nothing but what we have seen in the previous diagram. Okay, so this is nothing but between every two component there is the authentication, authorization, and admission control, and storing that request in the etcd. So these 4 steps will happen between every two component which are interacting. So here you can see that between deployment controller and replication controller, this will happen. Between replication controller and between scheduler, that will happen. Between scheduler and between API server, again that will happen. Okay, then between kubelet and your API server, that will also happen. Okay, and then your actual pod finally will be started. Okay, so this is just a broad view what all the things are happening behind the scene when we are creating one of the object of Kubernetes called deployment. Okay, So there are many such objects available in the Kubernetes, like daemon set. Like if you want to create a we talked like the containers are completely stateless. Like if you just kill it, whatever the data is generated inside it, that will be lost. But if you want to persist that data, we have a concept called persistent volume, where we can store the data. Okay, then we have a stateful set. So there are a lot of such objects are available in. Okay, so we are going to see all this in the training. Okay, all these objects, how these are used, what is the purpose of that. Okay, all this. Okay, so this complete is a practical training. Okay, so we are going to see each and every step with the help of example. Okay, and with lot of hands-on, lot of practice examples. Okay, these are some advantages that we get with e-learning. Okay, so you can just read it out. You will get the complete LMS, lifetime LMS access, where you can get the recorded session as and when you want. You can just go to that recorded session. You can understand what all the happens, what all the things happened if you miss something in the session. Okay, so there are a lot of advantages that we are getting. We are also providing the Kubernetes related dump that is required for certification. Even if you just practice all those example, okay, you can easily clear Kubernetes certification. But for that you need a practice. Okay, practice is very important. There's a lot of reference material provided, that is a lot of Git repos are provided, so you'll get a lot of stuff.